My name is Faith Henderson. I'm 36 years old. And while I was still drowning in the devastating grief of losing my 8-year-old son Michael to acute lymphoblastic leukemia after a 2-year battle that consumed every aspect of my life, my sister-in-law Patricia Henderson liquidated his entire $800,000 trust fund to pay for my cousin Jennifer's medical school expenses, then had the audacity to announce at Jennifer's graduation party that Michael's trust made this possible, while the entire family applauded this beautiful way his memory lives on. What they didn't know was that while I appeared broken and compliant in my overwhelming grief, I had been secretly working with trust attorneys and child advocacy lawyers who were horrified by my family's actions, and that Michael's trust contained specific legal language requiring my written consent for any distributions, making their theft not only morally reprehensible, but also a clear violation of trust law and the sacred wishes of a dying child who had begged me to use his money to help other sick children like him. The morning that would forever divide my life into before and after started like so many others during Michael's final month of treatment at Seattle Children's Hospital, with me sleeping in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside his bed, while machines monitored his vital signs and delivered the medications that were supposed to save his life, but were losing their effectiveness against the aggressive cancer that had already stolen so much of his childhood and innocence. He had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was 6 years old, during what should have been a carefree summer of swimming lessons and playground adventures, instead becoming a terrifying introduction to a world of hospitals, chemotherapy, bone marrow biopsies, and the kind of medical terminology that no parent should ever have to learn. "Mommy, are you awake?" Michael whispered that morning, his voice weak, but still carrying the gentle sweetness that had characterized his personality, even during the darkest moments of his treatment, when pain and medications made him irritable and confused in ways that broke my heart, but never diminished my fierce love and determination to fight alongside him. I opened my eyes to see my beautiful boy looking at me with the kind of wisdom and compassion that no 8-year-old should possess, his bald head covered by the soft blue beanie that his grandmother had knitted for him, his thin frame dwarfed by the hospital bed that had become his world for the past 3 weeks, as his oncologist Dr. Sarah Chen tried increasingly aggressive treatments to halt the progression of cancer cells that seemed determined to steal him from everyone who loved him. "I'm awake, sweetheart," I said, reaching over to hold his small hand, which felt so fragile and precious in my palm. "How are you feeling this morning? Did you sleep okay? Or were the machines too noisy again?" Michael had developed an extraordinary patience and maturity during his 2-year battle with leukemia, rarely complaining about the discomfort, side effects, and indignities that came with aggressive cancer treatment, instead focusing on the nurses who made him laugh, the therapy dogs that visited his room, and the other children in the pediatric oncology ward who were fighting their own battles against diseases that shouldn't exist in such young bodies. "I slept pretty good," Michael replied, though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes and knew that the latest round of chemotherapy was taking a devastating toll on his small body. "But Mommy, I need to talk to you about something important. Something I've been thinking about a lot." The serious tone in his voice was unusual and concerning, since Michael typically approached even difficult conversations with the kind of optimism and humor that had sustained our family through the worst moments of his illness and treatment. His sudden gravity suggested that he was preparing to discuss something that he had been considering carefully, probably during the long hours when pain and medication made sleep impossible. "Of course, baby, you can talk to me about anything," I said, settling more comfortably in the chair so I could give him my complete attention. "What's on your mind?" Michael looked toward the window where morning sunlight was filtering through the blinds, casting gentle patterns on the wall of his hospital room, then back at me with an expression that seemed far too mature and contemplative for a child who should have been worrying about homework and soccer practice instead of mortality and legacy. "Mommy, I know I might not get better," Michael said quietly, his words hitting me like a physical blow, even though I had been trying to prepare myself for this conversation since Dr. Chen's latest prognosis had revealed that his cancer was no longer responding to treatment. "And I want to make sure that if something happens to me, the money that Grandpa Henderson set up for me gets used to help other kids who are sick like me." The trust fund that Michael was referring to had been established by his paternal grandfather, Robert Henderson, who had built a successful manufacturing company and wanted to ensure that his grandson would have financial security for college, career development, and whatever dreams he chose to pursue as an adult. The fund contained $800,000 that had grown through careful investment over Michael's lifetime. Money that was meant to provide opportunities and choices that would honor Robert's belief in education, hard work, and family legacy. "Michael, we don't need to talk about that right now," I said, though I knew this conversation was important to him, and that avoiding it would only increase his anxiety about the future and his desire to ensure that his potential death would have some meaning beyond the devastation it would cause to our family. "Yes, we do, Mommy," Michael insisted with the kind of gentle determination that had characterized his approach to treatment decisions throughout his illness. "I've been watching the other kids here, and I know that some of their families don't have enough money for all the medicines and treatments they need. If I don't get to grow up and use Grandpa's money for college and stuff, I want it to go to the hospital to help kids whose families can't afford everything." The sophistication of Michael's thinking about charitable giving and his awareness of the financial hardships that other families face during pediatric cancer treatment was both heartbreaking and inspiring, revealing the depth of empathy and social consciousness that had developed during his 2 years of treatment alongside children from various economic backgrounds. "That's a very generous and thoughtful idea, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion of discussing my child's potential death and his mature understanding of mortality and legacy. "And if that time comes, I promise I'll make sure your wishes are honored exactly the way you want them to be." But Michael wasn't finished expressing his thoughts about the trust fund and how he wanted his money to be used if he didn't survive to inherit it himself, apparently having given considerable thought to the specific ways his potential legacy could help other children and families facing similar medical crises. "I want the money to go to research too, so maybe doctors can find better medicines that don't make kids feel so sick," Michael continued. "And I want some of it to help families pay for things like parking and food when they have to stay at the hospital for a long time, because I know that costs a lot of money that some people don't have." The comprehensive nature of Michael's charitable vision revealed how much he had observed and absorbed during his hospital stays, understanding not just the medical aspects of childhood cancer treatment, but also the broader financial and emotional challenges that affected entire families throughout the treatment process. Have you ever listened to your dying child make mature and compassionate plans for distributing his inheritance to help other sick children, while your heart broke from the unfairness of a world where 8-year-olds have to think about their own mortality? That's exactly what I experienced as Michael shared his thoughtful plans for ensuring that his potential death would create something positive and meaningful for other families facing similar tragedies. "Michael, I am so proud of the kind and generous person you are," I told him. "And I promise you that if something happens, every penny of Grandpa's money will be used exactly the way you want it to be used, to help other children and families, and to support research that might prevent other kids from getting as sick as you've been." The promise I made to Michael that morning would become the most important commitment of my life, though I had no way of knowing that keeping that promise would require legal battles against my own family members who would steal his trust fund and use it for their own purposes, while claiming they were honoring his memory. Michael passed away 6 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in November, surrounded by family members who had gathered to say goodbye to the bravest and most compassionate child any of us had ever known. His final words were, "Tell the other kids to be brave like me," and his death left a hole in my heart that felt like it would never heal, though it also strengthened my determination to fulfill the charitable wishes he had expressed with such maturity and wisdom. The funeral service was held at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, where Michael had been baptized, and where he had participated in Sunday school programs during the periods when his treatment allowed him enough energy to attend services and interact with other children. The church was filled with family, friends, medical staff from Seattle Children's Hospital, teachers from his elementary school, and other families from the pediatric oncology ward who understood the devastating loss that cancer had inflicted on our family. Michael Henderson was a beacon of hope and courage during his battle with leukemia, Pastor Williams said during the eulogy. But more than that, he was a child who maintained his compassion and generosity even during his own suffering, always thinking about how he could help others and make the world a better place for children who were facing similar challenges. Chut. The service was beautiful and meaningful, celebrating Michael's life while acknowledging the grief and loss that would affect everyone who had known and loved him. But it was also the beginning of what would become a complicated and painful process of settling his estate and ensuring that his charitable wishes were honored according to both his explicit requests and the legal requirements of the trust fund that his grandfather had established. The trust documentation was comprehensive and specific, naming me as the primary beneficiary with full authority over distribution decisions, while also designating my sister-in-law, Patricia Henderson, as a co-trustee, who could provide administrative assistance but could not authorize distributions without my written consent and approval. Patricia was Robert Henderson's daughter and Michael's aunt, a 42-year-old attorney who worked for a mid-sized Seattle law firm and had been involved in managing various family financial matters since her father's death 3 years earlier. She had always been close to Michael and had visited him regularly during his treatment, often bringing books and games that helped distract him during the long hours of chemotherapy and recovery. Faith, I want you to know that I'm here to help with whatever you need regarding Michael's trust and making sure his wishes are carried out appropriately, Patricia had said during the weeks following the funeral, when I was still struggling to function through the overwhelming grief and unable to focus on financial or legal matters that seemed trivial compared to the magnitude of losing my child. The offer of assistance seemed both generous and necessary, since I had no experience with trust administration or charitable giving procedures, and I was grateful to have a family member with legal expertise who could help navigate the complex process of fulfilling Michael's wishes while ensuring that all legal requirements were met properly. I appreciate your help, Patricia, I had replied. Michael was very specific about wanting his money to go to children's cancer research and family support programs at Seattle Children's Hospital, and I want to make sure we handle everything correctly to honor his wishes and his memory. Patricia nodded sympathetically and assured me that she understood the importance of following Michael's charitable instructions precisely, while also suggesting that we take time to explore various options for maximizing the impact of his donation and ensuring that the money would be used most effectively for the purposes he had specified. There are different ways to structure charitable giving that might allow Michael's money to have even greater impact, Patricia explained, and we should research the most effective approaches before making any final decisions about distribution. The suggestion seemed reasonable and thoughtful, and I was grateful to have someone with legal and financial expertise helping to ensure that Michael's charitable legacy would be handled professionally and would achieve the maximum benefit for the children's cancer programs that had been so important to him. But what I didn't understand at the time was that Patricia's offer of help was actually the beginning of a systematic manipulation that would eventually result in the theft of Michael's entire trust fund for purposes that had nothing to do with his wishes and everything to do with solving financial problems for other family members who felt entitled to his money. During the first few months after Michael's death, I was so overwhelmed with grief and the practical challenges of rebuilding my life as a mother who had lost her only child that I rarely asked Patricia for detailed updates about the trust administration or questioned her suggestions about research and planning that she claimed were necessary before implementing Michael's charitable wishes. Everything is progressing well with the trust research, Patricia would report during our occasional phone conversations. I'm investigating various options for charitable giving that will ensure Michael's money has the maximum impact for children's cancer research and patient family support programs. The reports were vague, but reassuring, suggesting that Patricia was taking a thorough and professional approach to fulfilling Michael's wishes, while allowing me the time and space I needed to process my grief, without worrying about financial and legal details that I wasn't emotionally ready to handle. But as months passed and I began to emerge from the deepest phase of mourning, I started asking more specific questions about the trust administration and requesting concrete information about timelines for implementing Michael's charitable donations to Seattle Children's Hospital and associated research programs. Patricia, I think I'm ready to start moving forward with Michael's charitable giving, I said during a phone call about 8 months after his death. I'd like to meet with representatives from the hospital and research programs to discuss how we can honor his wishes and get his money working to help other children as soon as possible. Patricia's response to my request for action was evasive and concerning, suggesting that there were complications and considerations that I didn't understand, and that premature distribution of the trust funds might result in less effective charitable impact than what could be achieved through additional research and planning. Faith, I want to make sure we don't rush into anything that might not serve Michael's interests, as well as other options that might be available, Patricia said, her tone becoming more controlling and less supportive than it had been during our previous conversations about trust administration. The suggestion that I was rushing into fulfilling my son's explicit charitable wishes 8 months after his death was both insulting and alarming, especially since Michael's requests had been clear and specific rather than vague or complicated. Patricia, Michael's wishes weren't complicated, I replied, feeling the first stirrings of concern about Patricia's apparent reluctance to proceed with distributions that should have been straightforward. He wanted his money to go to children's cancer research and family support programs. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to honor his clear instructions. But Patricia continued to resist moving forward with Michael's charitable giving, offering increasingly elaborate explanations about legal complexities and strategic considerations that seemed designed to delay rather than facilitate the implementation of his wishes. There are tax implications and structural decisions that need to be carefully considered, Patricia continued, and I think we should consult with additional financial advisors and charitable giving experts before making any commitments that might not be optimal for achieving Michael's goals. The emphasis on optimal outcomes and expert consultation was beginning to feel like manipulation rather than genuine concern for effective charitable giving, especially since Michael's wishes had been straightforward and could have been implemented through well-established charitable giving mechanisms that didn't require extensive research or consultation. As I continued to request action on Michael's charitable giving and received increasingly evasive responses from Patricia, I began to suspect that something was wrong with her administration of the trust, and that my son's money might be at risk from someone I had trusted to protect his legacy and honor his memory. But what I discovered when I finally demanded complete financial documentation and accounting records was far worse than simple mismanagement or delayed implementation. Patricia had systematically stolen Michael's entire trust fund and given it to our cousin Jennifer to pay for medical school expenses that had nothing to do with Michael's charitable wishes or his desire to help other sick children. The discovery came during what was supposed to be a routine meeting to review trust documentation and plan for charitable distributions, when I asked Patricia to provide complete financial statements showing the current balance and investment performance of Michael's trust fund. Faith, I need to tell you about some developments with the trust that I think will actually make you very happy and proud of how Michael's memory is being honored, Patricia said, her voice taking on an artificially cheerful tone that immediately raised my suspicions about what she was about to reveal. The phrase developments with the trust was ominous, and suggested that Patricia had made decisions or taken actions regarding Michael's money without consulting me, despite her role as co-trustee being explicitly limited to administrative assistance rather than distribution authority. What kind of developments? I asked, feeling anxiety rising as I anticipated that Patricia was about to reveal something that would violate Michael's wishes and betray the trust I had placed in her to protect his charitable legacy. Well, you know how Michael always loved helping other people and was so generous and caring toward everyone around him, Patricia began, clearly building toward some kind of justification for whatever she had done with his money. And you know how much he admired people who dedicated their lives to helping others, especially in medical fields. The reference to Michael's generous nature and his admiration for medical professionals was clearly intended to support whatever rationalization Patricia had developed for misusing his trust fund, but it also revealed that she was aware her actions required justification rather than being obviously appropriate. Our cousin Jennifer has been struggling to pay for medical school, and she's accumulated over $300,000 in student loan debt that was threatening to prevent her from completing her degree and becoming a doctor, Patricia continued. And the family decided that using Michael's trust fund to pay off her medical school debt would be a beautiful way to honor his memory, while helping someone achieve their dream of helping sick people. The revelation that Patricia had given Michael's money to pay for Jennifer's medical school was so shocking and inappropriate that I initially couldn't process what she was telling me. Michael had been explicit about wanting his money to go to children's cancer research and family support programs, not to pay off someone else's educational debt, regardless of their career goals or family relationship. You gave Michael's trust fund to Jennifer? I asked, my voice rising with disbelief and anger as I began to understand the magnitude of Patricia's betrayal and theft. The family felt that supporting Jennifer's medical education was exactly the kind of generous, forward-thinking charitable giving that Michael would have wanted, Patricia replied, apparently believing that framing the theft as charitable giving would make it acceptable, rather than recognizing it as a complete violation of Michael's explicit wishes and my authority as primary beneficiary. Patricia, Michael specifically said he wanted his money to go to children's cancer research and hospital family support programs, I said. He never mentioned paying for someone's medical school, and he certainly never agreed to have his money used for Jennifer's personal expenses. But Patricia was prepared for my objections and had developed elaborate justifications that portrayed the theft as a more effective way of honoring Michael's memory than following his actual wishes about charitable giving to established pediatric cancer programs. Faith, we thought about this very carefully, and we realized that helping Jennifer become a doctor would have much greater long-term impact than just donating money to existing programs that are already well-funded, Patricia explained. Jennifer is going to specialize in pediatric oncology, so Michael's money will actually be helping sick children for Jennifer's entire career, which could be 30 or 40 years of service. The justification that stealing Michael's money for Jennifer's education was more effective than honoring his explicit wishes was both logically flawed and morally reprehensible, completely ignoring the fact that Michael had been clear about his charitable intentions and that his money belonged to him rather than to family members who felt entitled to redirect it for their own purposes. Patricia, that decision wasn't yours to make, I replied. Michael's trust fund belongs to him, and his wishes about how it should be used were clear and specific. You had no right to give his money to Jennifer without consulting me or considering what Michael actually wanted. But Patricia continued to defend the theft as a family decision that was somehow more appropriate than following Michael's charitable instructions, apparently believing that collective family opinion could override the explicit wishes of a deceased child and the legal authority of his mother as primary beneficiary. Faith, this wasn't just my decision. The entire family discussed it and agreed that helping Jennifer complete medical school was the most meaningful way to use Michael's money, Patricia said. Everyone felt that Michael would be proud to know that his money helped someone become a doctor who will spend her career helping sick children. The claim that the entire family had participated in deciding how to use Michael's money was particularly infuriating because it revealed that multiple family members had known about the theft and had supported it rather than respecting Michael's wishes or my authority over his trust fund. Have you ever discovered that your entire family had conspired to steal money that your dying child had designated for charity, while convincing themselves that their theft was actually more noble than honoring his explicit wishes? That's exactly what I was experiencing, as Patricia revealed that Michael's trust fund had been given to Jennifer with the knowledge and approval of family members who should have been protecting his legacy rather than exploiting it for their own purposes. Who exactly was involved in this family decision about Michael's money? I asked, though I suspected the answer would reveal that the theft had been planned and executed by multiple people who had betrayed both Michael's memory and my trust in their integrity and respect for his wishes. Well, your mother and father were involved, and Jennifer's parents, and my husband David, and really everyone who cares about both Michael's memory and Jennifer's future, Patricia replied, apparently believing that listing more co-conspirators would make the theft seem more legitimate, rather than revealing the extent of the family betrayal. The discovery that my own parents had participated in stealing Michael's charitable fund was devastating, and revealed a level of family dysfunction and disrespect that I had never anticipated, even from relatives who had sometimes shown favoritism or poor judgment in other family matters. But Patricia wasn't finished explaining the family's justification for their theft, apparently believing that additional details about Jennifer's situation would convince me that violating Michael's wishes had been appropriate and even admirable. Jennifer is going to graduate next month, and she's already been accepted into a pediatric oncology residency program at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Patricia continued. So Michael's money didn't just pay for medical school. It's directly enabling someone to become the kind of doctor who will help children with cancer just like Michael. The suggestion that paying for Jennifer's medical school was equivalent to supporting children's cancer research and family support programs was both logically absurd and emotionally manipulative, completely ignoring the specific charitable programs that Michael had identified, and the established organizations that were already working to help pediatric cancer patients and families. Patricia, Jennifer becoming a doctor is not the same thing as the charitable giving that Michael requested, I said. And even if it were, the decision about how to use his money belonged to him and to me as his mother, not to you or to other family members who decided they knew better than an 8-year-old boy about how his own money should be used. But Patricia was committed to defending the theft and continued to argue that the family's decision had been more thoughtful and effective than simply following Michael's charitable instructions, apparently unable to understand that respecting his wishes was more important than achieving what they considered optimal outcomes. Faith, I understand that you're upset, but I really think that when you have time to consider what we've accomplished, you'll be proud of the way Michael's money is being used. Patricia said, Jennifer is going to have a wonderful career helping sick children, and she'll always remember that Michael's generosity made it possible. The suggestion that I should be proud of family members who had stolen my son's charitable fund while ignoring his explicit wishes was so offensive and tone-deaf that I realized Patricia genuinely believed she had done something admirable rather than recognizing the theft and betrayal she had committed. As I processed the magnitude of what Patricia and other family members had done to Michael's trust fund, I felt a combination of grief, rage, and determination that would ultimately motivate me to pursue every available legal remedy to recover his stolen money and ensure that his charitable wishes were honored despite his family's betrayal of his memory. But I also realized that confronting the family directly about their theft would likely result in additional manipulation and attempts to justify their actions rather than acknowledging their wrongdoing and voluntarily returning Michael's money to fulfill his charitable intentions. Instead, I made the decision that would ultimately lead to complete recovery of Michael's trust fund and appropriate consequences for everyone who had participated in stealing money that belonged to a child who had died of cancer. I would secretly work with attorneys and child advocacy experts to build a comprehensive legal case while appearing to accept the family's explanation for their theft. The decision to pursue legal action rather than family negotiation was both strategic and emotionally necessary, since I needed to honor Michael's memory by ensuring his charitable wishes were fulfilled exactly as he had requested, regardless of what family members thought would be more effective or appropriate. Over the next several months, I secretly consulted with trust attorneys, child advocacy lawyers, and experts in charitable giving, who were appalled by my family's theft and eager to help me recover Michael's money, while ensuring that everyone involved faced appropriate legal consequences for violating both trust law and the wishes of a dying child. The legal research confirmed that Patricia's actions constituted multiple serious violations of trust law, fiduciary duty, and charitable trust requirements, with potential civil penalties that could far exceed the original stolen amount, plus criminal charges for anyone who had knowingly participated in the unauthorized distribution of trust funds. But the most important discovery was that Michael's trust contained explicit language requiring my written consent for any distributions, making the family's theft not only morally wrong, but also legally invalid and subject to complete recovery through court-ordered restitution and penalties. As I built my legal case, while appearing to grieve quietly and accept the family's explanations, Jennifer was preparing for her medical school graduation and planning an elaborate celebration that would include the family members who had conspired to steal Michael's money while praising their own generosity and wisdom in redirecting his charitable fund for their preferred purposes. The investigation into the theft of Michael's trust fund revealed not only the extent of the family conspiracy, but also the sophisticated legal mechanisms that would allow complete recovery of his money, plus substantial additional penalties for everyone who had participated in violating trust law and exploiting a grieving mother's vulnerability during her most difficult time. Ms. Henderson, what your family members did constitutes multiple violations of Washington state trust law, including breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized distribution of trust assets, and conspiracy to defraud a charitable beneficiary, Attorney Sarah Morrison explained during our confidential consultation about legal options for recovering Michael's stolen money. Sarah Morrison specialized in trust litigation and child advocacy cases, and she was particularly experienced in situations where family members had exploited grief and vulnerability to steal inheritance funds from surviving relatives who were too overwhelmed to protect their legal interests immediately after traumatic losses. Your sister-in-law Patricia had no authority to distribute trust funds without your written consent, Sarah continued. And the fact that she obtained that consent through deception and manipulation makes her actions both civilly and criminally actionable under state and federal laws governing trust administration and fiduciary responsibility. The legal analysis confirmed that Patricia's role as co-trustee was limited to administrative assistance and record-keeping, with no authority to make distribution decisions or authorize transfers of trust assets without my explicit written approval, which had never been requested or provided for Jennifer's medical school payments. Even if you had consented to the distribution, the family would still be liable for violating Michael's charitable intentions, since trust law requires that distributions honor the stated wishes of the beneficiary, especially in cases involving charitable giving by deceased minors, Sarah explained. The legal protections for honoring Michael's charitable wishes were comprehensive and designed specifically to prevent family members from exploiting children's deaths to redirect charitable funds for their own purposes, rather than respecting the deceased child's intentions and legacy. But Sarah's most important advice was that building the strongest possible case would require allowing the family to continue celebrating their theft, while I gathered comprehensive evidence of their conspiracy and their knowledge that they were violating both Michael's wishes and my authority as primary beneficiary. We need to document not only the unauthorized distribution, but also the family's awareness that they were acting against your wishes and Michael's charitable intentions, Sarah explained, which means allowing them to continue their current behavior while we build an ironclad case for complete recovery plus damages. The strategy required me to continue appearing broken and compliant while secretly working with legal experts to ensure that everyone involved in the theft would face maximum consequences when their crimes were finally exposed and prosecuted. Meanwhile, Jennifer was preparing for her medical school graduation and planning an elaborate celebration that would provide the perfect opportunity to document the family's celebration of stolen money while gathering additional evidence of their conspiracy to violate Michael's trust and charitable intentions. Jennifer's graduation party is going to be the perfect venue for exposing the family's theft, Sarah explained. We'll coordinate the service of legal papers during the celebration when the maximum number of conspirators are present to witness the consequences of their actions. The timing would be both strategic and symbolic, ensuring that Jennifer's celebration of educational achievement that had been funded by stolen money would become the moment when the family's crimes were exposed and legal proceedings began to recover Michael's trust fund. Trust attorney Michael Chang, who specialized in charitable trust violations, provided additional expertise about the specific legal remedies available for recovering Michael's money, while ensuring that his charitable wishes were honored, despite the family's theft and betrayal. In cases involving unauthorized distribution of charitable trust funds, courts typically order complete restitution plus punitive damages that can double or triple the original amount, Michael explained. And the fact that this involves exploiting a child's death for family financial benefit will likely result in maximum penalties and criminal referrals. The legal consequences would be appropriate and comprehensive, ensuring that everyone involved in the theft would face serious financial and legal penalties, while Michael's charitable fund was restored and distributed according to his explicit wishes about helping other sick children. We're also going to seek injunctive relief, requiring Jennifer to repay her medical school debt through traditional student loans, rather than continuing to benefit from money that was stolen from a children's cancer charity, Michael continued. The prospect of Jennifer losing her free medical education and having to assume normal student loan debt was particularly satisfying, since it would eliminate the primary benefit that the family had achieved through their theft, while ensuring that Michael's money was available for its intended charitable purposes. As Jennifer's graduation celebration approached and legal papers were prepared for service during the party, I felt a combination of grief for Michael and determination to honor his memory by ensuring that his charitable wishes were fulfilled despite his family's betrayal and exploitation of his legacy. The forensic accounting analysis that was conducted as part of the legal case revealed the full extent of the family's theft and provided comprehensive documentation that would support both civil recovery and criminal prosecution of everyone who had participated in stealing Michael's trust fund. The family transferred the entire $800,000 trust balance to pay for Jennifer's medical school tuition, living expenses, and educational materials over a period of 4 years, forensic accountant David Martinez explained. And they also used trust funds to pay for her MCAT preparation, medical school application fees, and even some personal expenses that had nothing to do with her education. The forensic analysis revealed that the theft had been systematic and comprehensive, with family members using Michael's money not just for Jennifer's tuition, but also for associated expenses that represented a complete conversion of his charitable fund for personal family benefit. Your family members also used trust funds to pay for Jennifer's graduation party, her medical equipment purchases, and even a car that she needed for her residency program, David continued, which demonstrates that they viewed Michael's money as a general family resource, rather than respecting its designated charitable purpose. The evidence of additional theft beyond the medical school payments was both infuriating and legally valuable, since it demonstrated the family's complete disregard for Michael's charitable intentions and their willingness to exploit his memory for any family financial need that they considered worthy. But David's most important discovery was that the family had been discussing the theft for months before executing it, creating a paper trail of emails, text messages, and recorded conversations that proved premeditation and conspiracy rather than impulsive or well-intentioned decision-making. We have extensive documentation showing that your family members planned this theft carefully and discussed various ways to justify it to you if you discovered what they had done, David explained, which proves that they knew their actions were wrong and were deliberately deceiving you about their intentions. The evidence of premeditation and deception would be crucial for establishing criminal intent and ensuring maximum penalties for everyone involved in the conspiracy to steal Michael's charitable fund while manipulating me during my period of grief and vulnerability. As the legal case was finalized and service of process was prepared for Jennifer's graduation celebration, I reflected on the 8 months I had spent appearing broken and helpless while actually building a comprehensive case that would ensure Michael's charitable wishes were honored and that everyone who had betrayed his memory would face appropriate consequences. The contrast between my apparent vulnerability and my actual strength and determination was strategic and necessary, allowing me to gather evidence and build legal remedies while protecting myself from additional manipulation and family pressure that would have complicated the recovery process. Jennifer's medical school graduation party was held at an elegant venue in downtown Seattle, with over 60 family members and friends invited to celebrate her achievement and her upcoming residency in pediatric oncology at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The celebration was elaborate and expensive, featuring professional catering, live music, and decorative elements that had been funded partly through additional theft from Michael's trust fund, according to the forensic accounting analysis. Everyone is so proud of Jennifer for completing medical school and beginning her career helping sick children, my mother announced during the cocktail hour, apparently unaware that her praise of Jennifer's achievement was about to be overshadowed by the exposure of the theft that had made it possible. The guest list included all the family members who had participated in conspiring to steal Michael's money, providing the perfect opportunity to serve legal papers on multiple defendants simultaneously, while documenting their celebration of stolen funds and their complete lack of remorse about violating a dying child's charitable wishes. I arrived at the party wearing the simple black dress that had become my uniform during months of grieving, along with Michael's hospital bracelet that I had never removed since his death, serving as both a reminder of my son and a symbol of the charitable mission that I was determined to fulfill despite family betrayal. "Faith, I'm so glad you could make it tonight." Patricia greeted me at the entrance, apparently confident that her theft had been successful and that I had accepted the family's justification for redirecting Michael's charitable fund. Jennifer is so excited to share her achievements with everyone who supported her through medical school. The reference to everyone who supported her was particularly galling since I had never consented to supporting Jennifer's education and had been systematically deceived about how Michael's money was being used rather than being consulted about the family's decision to violate his charitable wishes. The party atmosphere was celebratory and festive, with guests praising Jennifer's academic achievements and expressing excitement about her future career in pediatric oncology, apparently unaware that her education had been funded through theft from a children's cancer charity rather than through legitimate financial planning and family support. "Jennifer is going to make such a difference in the lives of sick children," said one family friend during the cocktail conversation. "It's wonderful that she was able to complete medical school without the burden of student loans that prevent so many young doctors from pursuing careers in pediatric specialties." The praise for Jennifer's debt-free medical education was painful to hear, knowing that her financial advantages had been achieved through stealing money that Michael had specifically designated for helping other sick children, rather than for paying someone else's educational expenses. But as guests continued celebrating Jennifer's achievement and praising the family's generosity in supporting her education, legal papers were being finalized for service during the formal dinner portion of the evening, when maximum witnesses would be present to observe the consequences of the family's theft and conspiracy. The dinner program included speeches from Jennifer's parents, testimonials from medical school professors, and a presentation about her upcoming residency program, all building toward Jennifer's own thank you speech that would provide the perfect moment for serving legal papers and exposing the criminal nature of her celebration. "I want to thank everyone who made my medical school dream possible," Jennifer began her speech, apparently confident that her achievements were legitimate and worthy of celebration, rather than understanding that her career had been built on money stolen from a dying child's charity. "But most especially, I want to thank Michael's family for their incredible generosity in using his trust fund to pay for my education," Jennifer continued. "I know that Michael would be so proud to know that his money helped someone achieve their dream of becoming a doctor who will spend her career helping sick children just like him." The public acknowledgement that Michael's money had funded Jennifer's education was both personally devastating and legally valuable, providing additional evidence of the family's awareness that they had used funds designated for charitable purposes rather than claiming ignorance about the source of their financial support. "Michael's spirit lives on through my medical career, and every child I help will benefit from his generous legacy," Jennifer concluded, raising her glass in a toast that was immediately joined by all the party guests who believed they were celebrating legitimate achievement rather than stolen success. As the applause for Jennifer's speech continued, and guests offered additional congratulations about her career prospects and her gratitude toward Michael's memory, attorney Sarah Morrison entered the venue with legal papers and law enforcement support to serve the lawsuits and criminal referrals that would expose the family's theft and begin the process of recovering Michael's charitable fund. Have you ever watched people celebrate achievements that were built on money stolen from your dying child, while they convinced themselves that their theft was actually honoring his memory? That's exactly what I experienced as Jennifer's party reached its peak celebration moment, just before federal agents and process servers would transform the evening into the most humiliating and legally consequential exposure of family betrayal and criminal conspiracy that any of the attendees would ever witness. At exactly 8:30 p.m., during the peak of Jennifer's celebration, when all guests were gathered for the toast and speech portion of the evening, attorney Sarah Morrison approached the head table with legal documents and federal agents who would serve papers on Jennifer, Patricia, and the other family members who had conspired to steal Michael's trust fund. Jennifer Walsh, Patricia Henderson, Linda Peterson, and Robert Peterson, Sarah announced in a clear voice that carried throughout the elegant dining room. "You are being served with civil lawsuits for theft of charitable trust funds, conspiracy to defraud, and violation of fiduciary duty in connection with the unauthorized distribution of Michael Henderson's trust fund." The reaction from the party guests was immediate and dramatic, with conversations stopping abruptly as people realized that Jennifer's celebration was being interrupted by legal action related to the funding source that had made her medical education possible. These lawsuits seek complete restitution of the $800,000 that was stolen from Michael Henderson's charitable trust, plus punitive damages, attorney fees, and injunctive relief requiring defendants to restore the funds for their intended charitable purposes, Sarah continued, ensuring that every guest understood the magnitude of the theft and the legal consequences that the family was now facing. The service of legal papers was swift and professional, but the impact on the party atmosphere was devastating, as family members and friends realized that they had been celebrating achievements that were built on systematic theft from a children's cancer charity rather than legitimate family generosity and support. "I can't believe they stole money from Michael's charity fund," whispered one guest as the legal implications of the evening's revelations began to sink in. That money was supposed to help other sick children, not pay for Jennifer's personal expenses. The exposure of the theft was comprehensive and public, ensuring that everyone who had been praising Jennifer's achievement and the family's generosity now understood that they had been deceived about the source of the financial support and that their celebration was actually commemorating criminal behavior rather than legitimate success. Jennifer's reaction to being served with legal papers was immediate and panicked, as she realized that her debt-free medical education was about to be challenged and that she might be required to assume normal student loan obligations rather than continuing to benefit from money stolen from a children's charity. "Faith, this is crazy," Jennifer said, approaching me with a desperate expression as she held the legal documents that detailed her liability for receiving stolen charitable funds. "I didn't know that using Michael's money was illegal. Your family told me that you had agreed to support my education as a way of honoring his memory." The claim that she'd been deceived about my consent was contradicted by extensive evidence that she had been present during family discussions about taking Michael's money without consulting me, but it also revealed her awareness that legitimate consent would have been necessary for the distribution to be legal. "Jennifer, Michael specifically requested that his money go to children's cancer research and family support programs," I replied, "not to pay someone else's educational expenses, regardless of their career goals or family relationships." But Jennifer was more concerned about her personal financial liability than about the violation of Michael's charitable wishes, apparently viewing the legal action as an attack on her achievements, rather than understanding it as an effort to honor a dying child's explicit requests about charitable giving. "But I'm going to be a pediatric oncologist," Jennifer protested. "So Michael's money is still helping sick children, just in a different way than he originally planned." The suggestion that stealing charitable funds was acceptable as long as the thief eventually worked in a related field was both legally and morally absurd, completely ignoring Michael's specific wishes about supporting established research and family assistance programs, rather than individual career development. Meanwhile, Patricia was also struggling to process the legal consequences of her theft and attempting to justify her actions as appropriate trust administration, rather than acknowledging the systematic deception and conspiracy that had enabled the family's exploitation of Michael's charitable fund. "Faith, I was trying to honor Michael's memory in the most effective way possible," Patricia said, clearly hoping to convince me to withdraw the legal action rather than understanding that her theft had been both illegal and morally reprehensible. "Patricia, you stole $800,000 from a dying child's charity without my consent and gave it to Jennifer for personal expenses," I replied. "There's nothing honorable about that, regardless of how you tried to justify it to yourself and the rest of the family." The conversation was brief and decisive, as I had no interest in providing Patricia with additional opportunities to manipulate the situation or justify her theft through elaborate explanations about effective charitable giving or family decision-making authority that she had never possessed. As legal papers were served and federal agents began documenting the evidence of theft and conspiracy, the party guests quickly realized that they were witnessing the exposure of serious criminal behavior rather than celebrating legitimate achievement, and they began leaving the venue to avoid association with people who had stolen money from a children's cancer charity. "I feel terrible that we were celebrating Jennifer's graduation without knowing that her education was paid for with money stolen from sick children," posted one family friend on social media after leaving the party. "What they did to Michael's memory is unforgivable." The social media response to the evening's revelations was swift and devastating, with party attendees expressing shock and disgust about being deceived into celebrating achievements that were built on theft from a charitable fund designated to help pediatric cancer patients and families. But the most satisfying aspect of the legal action was watching the family members who had conspired to steal Michael's money realize that their celebration was actually the moment when their crimes were exposed, and serious legal consequences began that would ensure Michael's charitable wishes were finally honored exactly as he had requested. As federal agents continued processing evidence and serving additional legal papers on conspirators who had participated in the theft, I felt a combination of grief for Michael and satisfaction that justice was finally being served for the family members who had betrayed his memory and exploited my vulnerability during the most difficult period of my life. The aftermath of the legal action at Jennifer's graduation party was swift and comprehensive, with federal prosecutors and civil attorneys working together to ensure that everyone involved in stealing Michael's trust fund faced appropriate criminal and civil consequences while the charitable funds were recovered and distributed according to his explicit wishes about helping other sick children. Your family members are facing federal charges including conspiracy to defraud, theft of charitable funds, violation of fiduciary duty, and wire fraud," Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert Chen explained during our meeting about the criminal case timeline. "And the evidence is so comprehensive that we expect guilty pleas rather than trials that would result in even more severe sentences." The federal charges carried potential prison sentences of 5 to 10 years for each defendant, reflecting the sophisticated nature of their conspiracy and the particular cruelty of stealing charitable funds that had been designated by a dying child to help other children facing similar medical crises. Jennifer is also facing civil liability for receiving stolen charitable funds, which means she'll be required to repay her medical school debt through traditional student loans rather than continuing to benefit from money that belonged to children's cancer research, Attorney Chen continued. The financial consequences for Jennifer were appropriate and just, ensuring that she would bear the normal costs of medical education rather than receiving free professional training through money stolen from a charitable fund that was meant to help sick children and their families. But Attorney Chen's most important information was that the asset recovery process had already begun, with Michael's trust fund being restored to its original balance, plus interest and penalties that would increase the amount available for charitable distribution beyond what he had originally designated. The court has ordered complete restitution of the $800,000 trust fund, plus $300,000 in punitive damages and interest, Attorney Chen explained, which means Michael's charitable fund will have over $1.1 million available for distribution to the children's cancer research and family support programs that he specifically requested. The financial recovery exceeded the original trust amount and ensured that Michael's charitable legacy would be even more substantial than he had envisioned when he made his dying wishes about helping other sick children and supporting families who were facing similar medical crises. Patricia was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for her role as ringleader of the conspiracy, while my parents and Jennifer's parents received sentences of 18 months each for their participation in the theft and their knowledge that they were violating Michael's charitable wishes and my authority as primary beneficiary. Your sister-in-law will serve her full sentence without possibility of parole, Attorney Chen informed me during our final meeting about the criminal case resolution, and all defendants will be required to make complete restitution plus additional community service working with children's cancer charities to understand the impact of their crimes. The prison sentences were satisfying and appropriate, ensuring that everyone who had participated in stealing Michael's charitable fund would face substantial consequences while also requiring them to work directly with the kinds of programs that Michael had wanted to support through his generous legacy. Jennifer's medical school debt was transferred back to her personal responsibility, and she was required to secure traditional student loans to cover the education costs that had been funded through stolen charitable money, ensuring that she would bear the normal financial burden of medical education rather than receiving free professional training through theft. The charitable distribution of Michael's recovered trust fund was ceremony that provided closure and fulfillment of his dying wishes, with $1.1 million being donated to children's cancer research programs and family support services at Seattle Children's Hospital, exactly as he had requested during our final conversation in his hospital room. Michael Henderson's charitable legacy will support pediatric cancer research and provide assistance to families who are facing the same challenges that he and his mother experienced, Dr. Sarah Chen, his former oncologist, said during the dedication ceremony. His generosity will help thousands of children and families over the coming years, which is exactly what he hoped to achieve through his gift. The ceremony was attended by medical staff who had cared for Michael, other families from the pediatric oncology ward, researchers who would benefit from his charitable support, and community members who had been inspired by his story of compassion and generosity despite his own suffering and early death. But the most meaningful aspect of the charitable distribution was knowing that Michael's wishes had been honored exactly as he had requested, despite the family conspiracy that had attempted to steal his money and redirect it for their own purposes, rather than respecting his mature and thoughtful plans for helping other sick children. The research laboratory that was named in Michael's honor became a symbol of his lasting impact on pediatric cancer treatment, with his photograph and story displayed prominently to remind researchers and medical staff about the brave young patient whose generosity was supporting their work to find better treatments and ultimately cures for childhood cancer. As I reflected on the 2 years that had transformed me from a grieving mother whose family had stolen her son's charitable fund, to a strong advocate who had successfully recovered his money and ensured his wishes were honored, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about legal protection or family trust, but about the power of a mother's love to transcend grief and fight for her child's memory, even when that fight required challenging the people who should have been supporting his. Legacy. Michael's trust fund had ultimately achieved exactly what he had envisioned, supporting research that might help other children avoid his fate, and providing assistance to families who were struggling with the financial and emotional challenges of pediatric cancer treatment, creating a lasting legacy of compassion and generosity that reflected his character and values. If you're reading this and you're dealing with family members who have exploited your grief or tragedy to steal from charitable funds or inheritance money that was designated for specific purposes, please know that you have legal rights and resources that can help you recover stolen funds while ensuring that the wishes of your loved ones are honored rather than being ignored by relatives who feel entitled to redirect money for their own purposes. Theft of charitable funds is a serious crime that carries substantial penalties, including prison sentences, complete restitution, and additional damages that can far exceed the original stolen amounts, especially when family members exploit grief and vulnerability to violate the explicit wishes of deceased loved ones who had designated money for charitable purposes. Setting boundaries with family members who steal from charitable legacies isn't cruel. It's necessary for honoring the memory and wishes of people we've lost, while ensuring that their intended beneficiaries receive the support that was promised through generous final gifts. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone's memory is to fight for their wishes to be honored exactly as they intended, even when that requires legal action against family members who would rather exploit tragedy for personal benefit than respect the charitable legacy that your loved one wanted to create. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had family members steal from charitable funds or inheritance money that was designated for specific causes? How did you handle situations where relatives exploited your grief to redirect money away from its intended purposes while expecting you to accept their justifications? Your story might help someone else who's dealing with similar theft and needs to understand that they have legal options for recovering stolen charitable funds and honoring the wishes of loved ones who designated money for causes they cared about. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that charitable legacies and final wishes are worth protecting through whatever legal means necessary, even when the thieves are family members who claim they know better than the person who actually designated how their money should be used after death. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.